Hello and welcome to a new round of previews because we haven't had enough Dominion in 2022. It's actually just completely ridiculous how much Dominion we've got. And Donald X agrees. He says, I know what you're thinking. What this year needs is more Dominion. Well, I'm here to satisfy that need, starting with previews. So yeah, Plunder expansion is going to be dropping at least online at the end of this week. And as has been established as the pattern, we will get 5 days of previews during which you can play with the previews that have been, or the cards that have been revealed through the previews online. And then the full expansion will release after that. I'm not exactly sure what timing, but I would assume on Monday. Anyway, so we are going to start with, well, I guess I'll just read out what Donald X said. Plunder is a crazy huge set with 40 kingdom cards and 30 landscapes. He'll be previewing a tenth of each of the set each day for 5 days, meaning at the end you'll have seen half of it, not counting loot, whatever that is. The two central themes are treasures and durations. Plunder is the intersection of the sea and loot. Today, let's check out the treasures theme. So we start with an image of 4 treasures. It didn't really fit well onto my screen, so I'm just showing... that's the wrong one. Just showing 2 of them at a time. So starting with tools and pendant. Donald X says tools is just some new treasure. There are a bunch of them, and this is one of them. It gains copies of things in play, which plays into the durations theme. A little preview of tomorrow's preview. Okay. So, tools. Gain a copy of a card anyone has in play. That's kind of cute. So, I mean, most of the time, presumably, you're going to be using this to gain copies of cards that you have in play, because during your turn, you have a lot more stuff in play than your opponent does. Obviously, they could have a duration, they could have, I don't know, pretty much just durations. I'm trying to think if, most of the other things that stay out aren't in play per se. So, things on your tavern mat, things in exile, whatever. But there may be some exceptions I'm not thinking of. But it should pretty much just be durations. But, this is a pretty powerful gainer, right? I mean, it has the same advantages as a relatively small category of other gainers where it can gain anything, and unlike say Camel Train, which so Camel Train, for example, can gain you any card, but not you have to gain a copy of that card ultimately to do it. I mean, that's true with tools as well, because you already have to have the card, but the nice thing is that once you have the one copy, you can keep gaining them as you go. So the sequencing is preferable to Camel Train, because Camel Train, you gain the copies first and then you get your one copy of whatever it is. So I mean, you could argue that that's worse in some cases, but a lot of the times the fact that you're adding them to your deck rather than to your exile as you go is going to be preferable. Also, of course, it's non-terminal. It does mean, you still need a potion to gain, scrying pool or what have you. But, if you can get that one grand market or that one city quarter or whatever, then this is a really, really strong gainer. That being said, it's not going to be very strong early in the game. So I don't know how strong it's actually going to be in practice. It's going to be something you're going to want to pick up in the mid game. It's really going to be board dependent, I suppose, but it does look pretty good to me. I would definitely expect this to be better than Camel Train, and just a pretty good card. Maybe not. I don't know. It's a little hard to say, because Camel Train is not very strong, right? And it does have one restriction that's similar to that, but it has a lot of other upsides compared to it, mostly that being non-terminal and being able to actually put the cards directly into your deck without needing to gain another copy in order to do so. So I would think that, and the 3 versus 4 cost difference doesn't really matter in my opinion. So I would think that this is going to be pretty good, but yeah, well, I guess we will see. It is, I mean, it's unfortunate that it can't work around potion cost restriction, but that's pretty much the only case where you would especially care. It will be interesting to think about what cards that your opponent has in play it will be good at gaining. Den of Sin jumps out at me as like a duration card that goes to your hand, so it's like very fast. Like you can, your opponent picks up a den, you play this, and you get to immediately play that den as well. It's almost acts like smugglers at that point. But most, obviously you can do that with Wharf and stuff too, but like most good cards aren't durations, so I don't know how relevant that part is. And there's not like a way. Well, I guess if there's some way you can get this into play during your opponent's turn, like then you could really do some stuff. Or conversely, if you could somehow get your opponent's non-duration cards into play during your turn, that seems even less likely than playing this during your opponent's turn. Like I pretty much would require like Way of the Mouse Vassal type stuff, I think. Anyway, so then we've got Pendant. +1 coin per differently named treasure you have in play. And Donald X says, Pendant is a treasure that cares about treasures. Why not have some of those? You will compare it to Bank, but it's really its own animal. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, it does. It does at first glance definitely seem similar to Bank. Obviously, this is more like the I don't know, the Menagerie or the Horn of Plenty or Courtier version of Bank or something like that, right? The thing that cares about variety. It's a 5 cost. That doesn't seem very good to me. I mean, there are going to be boards where this is giving you platinum money, and that will be pretty good. But there's a lot of boards where it won't, or in order for it to give you platinum money, you're going to have to keep bad cards in your deck that like kind of offset that as an advantage. So like if you have to keep a copper around, I mean, it does depend on the number of pendants you have. Like the more that you have, the more value you're getting out of that one copper. But like it's still, obviously less good if you have to do that than if it's all just packaged into like a single card in the way that it is with platinum. And like the base case is that it makes at most 4 coins. And even in order to do that, you do have to gain a silver and a gold. Gaining a silver is generally not like a big deal. It's any board where you're like considering playing with Pendant, presumably you'd want a silver anyway. Having to keep your coppers around, again, that depends. It's not great, but maybe if you can draw a deck and have 1 copper. But having to gain a gold like might legitimately be annoying. Depending on how you're gaining these pendants. I mean, I guess another way to look at this though is that it could just be a 5 cost gold, which is like, I mean, not amazing, but is like 5 cost non-terminal gold is, well, it's better than gold. Yeah, I mean, if you just have copper silver pendant or silver gold pendant, then you've got 5 cost golds, and that's okay. It's not amazing, but it is something that you can gain with 5 cost gainers, or like that is to say gainers that gain 5 costs that you can't do with gold. Although there's probably more gold gainers than there are things that gain 5 costs, but yeah, I think like it definitely has more upside than other comparable treasures at its price point that aren't like not including things like that are just intended to make money. So not including things like Crown or Counterfeit or whatever, but like of the treasures that are just intended to be like, yeah, this gives you some money. Like it definitely has more upside. But I suspect that overall it's going to be like most of the time not that strong. And then occasionally it'll be like really efficient payload and you'll be very happy to have it. All right, so then we've got 2 more cards from this part of the preview. We've got Mining Road, +1 action, +1 buy, +2 coins. Once this turn, when you gain a treasure, you may play it. Okay. Mining Road is a non-treasure that cares about treasures. It makes 1 leap into play, which is bound to be handy, and gives you +buy, so it's useful even if you're only gaining treasures by buying them. Yeah. I mean, hmm, that's one way to look at it. Like, if you if you have to buy a treasure to get it into play, then it, in a sense, it doesn't have plus buy, right? Um it just has more coins on it, like, in a way. I mean, depending on the value of the gaining. Like, if like you're buying the treasure because you want it for other reasons, like you're gonna like do trash for benefit stuff or whatever, like then that's, it's not like, oh, I didn't gain anything. But yeah, if you're just like, I want more money and I'm buying the treasure to have more money, but I'm not like, but I want to be buying, like, I want to be buying actions, like components to build, but I need more money, so I'm buying a treasure. Then at that point, it doesn't effectively really have the plus buy that you were looking for. I mean, obviously, it says plus buy on the card. Like, you can use it for plus buy. Obviously, I'm just saying, like, if you want to use that ability specifically to gain and play a treasure, then, like, if you're buying that treasure, then you are kind of like turning the plus buy into just coins. Um, in any case, obviously it'll be better if you have, if you can play this and then play a treasure gainer and put the treasure into play directly. That being said, so I mean, this is a 5 cost payload card that gives you 2 coins and a buy. It's a woodcutter. It's non-terminal, but it's a woodcutter. I mean, if you're gonna gain treasures anyway, then it is kind of like it has +1 card on it, and at that point, it's more like Grand Market, actually, which is a pretty big difference. But you have to want to be gaining those treasures, and the treasures are stop cards. So, like, if you, uh, this turn you gain the treasure, okay, great. Your mining road was not a stop card in a sense, but then next turn, both it and the treasure are stop cards. So I mean, you have to treat this really as a stop card. And in that respect, it does honestly seem pretty weak to me. Like, there are going to be times when it's really nice for sure to have that, like, immediate gain in play going, but I don't know. 5 cost for a terminal, or sorry, a non-terminal woodcutter seems pretty steep to me. Yeah, I think I think most of the time this is going to be a weak card. I mean, it will work nicely in Draw to X, like really nicely in Draw to X, despite the fact that you're not going to probably take advantage of its like, you call it innovation or the gain and play ability, because like I mean, it's kind of overcosted a little bit, arguably, for that, like, but still, like, getting plus buy non-terminal coins and buys in Draw to X is not that common. And if you're doing so, like, the Draw to X decks that tend to work the best have, like, rely on some of their components being non-terminal, right? So, like, you get the ones that are, Cursed Village or Hunting Lodge, where the village, or like so the draw card is actually a village, so that's, like, better than non-terminal. You get the stuff with, like, Minion, where at least, like, the draw card is non-terminal, though it's not providing you plus action. You get stuff with, like, cards like Coven or whatever, where the payload is non-terminal. So, which is helpful if you're doing your Draw to X with, like, Watchtower or something, where you need your terminal space with the draw cards. So that's nice here, and the fact that it comes with the buy, like Coven doesn't have a buy on it. Like, what are the other non-terminal payload cards? That, like, Mystic, that doesn't have a buy on it. I mean, Grand Market, of course. Grand Market's a lot more expensive, though. There's other ones that are single coin cards, like Market. I mean, Conspirator can be, of course, that, like, doesn't have a buy. Market has the buy. There's plenty of cards that, like, plenty of them that draw a card. But yeah, it definitely should have a niche in that kind of deck. But I think a lot of the time this is going to be overcosted. Though, if you've got like a 5 cost gainer or something, it might still be worth like throwing these into your deck because, well, it's better. It's certainly better than silver, and um, like if you need to add payload, this might still be the way to do it. And then we have rope. So finally, rope is a treasure duration. There will be more of these to come. Like rope, it's versatile. So rope is a 4 cost. Gives you a coin, gives you a buy. At the start of your next turn, +1 card, and you may trash a card from your hand. And it's a treasure duration. Okay, so it does a lot of things. And this seems good. Like, it's better than investment, right? Like, yeah, it does stay out. Investment doesn't do that, and it doesn't have the VP gaining on it. But early in the game, the fact that it stays out is not going to matter, like, all of the time. It's going to matter some of the time, right? If you see this on turn 3, then it doesn't matter. And it's just better. Like, it's drawing you a card, it's giving you a buy. I mean, maybe the buy doesn't matter, but the card certainly does. I guess, it is less likely to collide with the card you want to trash because it's start of turn trashing. Okay. Maybe it's actually not better than investment then, because that is a pretty big downside. But it's still, I don't know. It's still non-terminal trashing that's giving you useful payload. Like, obviously, 1 coin isn't very exciting, but +1 buy, like, does a lot, and the card draw is certainly nice. It's interesting how we're seeing more of this, like, draw a single card next turn stuff. So we saw that on Monkey, we saw that on Corsair, we see it on this card. Like, it's interesting because, like, we didn't see that on, like, anything for a long time. Like, basically, there weren't really any cards that would draw you 1 card without giving you an action, like, pretty much at all, like, for a long time in Dominion. Which makes sense, because drawing there's Ruined Library, but that's sort of a demonstration of why that wasn't a thing. And not that it's not drawing you the card terminally, but it isn't a cantrip. It's not +1 card +1 action. So yeah, it's interesting to see that happening. Anyway, so then after the treasures, we have landscapes. So Alex says, wait, any landscapes too? There are events. Let's start with 3 of those. Berry, 1 coin event. +1 buy, put any card from your discard pile on the bottom of your deck. Huh, okay. Barry puts a card on the bottom of your deck. I nailed the flavor there. You can bury a bunch of cards and set up some future turn, or just draw a particular card a little faster than you might otherwise. Yeah, that is interesting, because putting a card on the bottom of your deck, like, it's going to be something you want to be very tactical with, because on, like, top decking a card, whether you actually cause the card not to miss the shuffle, or to get to see it in the same shuffle without having to trigger a shuffle, is going to depend on the exact number of cards that you have left in your shuffle, right? So, like, on turn 3, if you have, like, you kind of would already have to have +buy for this to really work, but just, for the sake of illustration, right? You have 12 cards in your deck because you opened with 2 things, and you buy something, and then you buy Berry, and you put it on the bottom of your deck. Now you have 3 cards, like, next turn you're gonna draw 5 cards, then you're gonna draw another 3 cards the turn after, unless your opening buys were, drew cards or whatever. So, like, in that scenario, it doesn't accomplish all that much. It does make sure that you see it at the top of the next shuffle, but it doesn't make sure you see it this shuffle. But then if you have, if you had, like, a draw 2 card and a cantrip, then you would get to, well, I guess you'd have to see them both turn 3. or like a smithy would also work. Then you bottom deck it and it's in your 5-card hand the next turn. Like, so being able to track which of those things is the case is going to be important with this. And you can, if you have the money for it, you can kind of pad out the bottom of your deck with stuff. You know what this would have been really good with, actually, is Counting House Traveling Fair. You could bury your counting houses, like you're traveling, because the thing with Counting House Traveling Fair is you always had to like buy and top deck the counting house. That cost 5 coins, but bottom decking a counting house would have only cost 1 coin. And you Traveling Fair the coppers. You don't need to bury the coppers, but like you could bury a counting house, just one, and like make sure that your things were spaced out with that. Like this would actually been really useful with that deck. Rip Counting House. Anyway, but I think that example is an illustration of what I'm talking about. So like I think using this as essentially star chart could definitely also be a thing where you're just like on turn 4, you're like, okay, I bought, on turn 3, I bought my recruiter, and now on turn 4, I'm gonna buy Barry in a 3 cost instead of a 4, and I'm gonna essentially top deck the recruiter. Like that's definitely useful. But I think the really like interesting thing with this is going to be tracking, like, okay, these are the cards I have left in my deck, like this is how many of them draw cards, whatever, like how, when I bury 1 card, is it going to miss the shuffle or not? What if I bury 2 cards? What if I bury 3 cards? Like, so it seems like a very interesting and challenging event. Hard to evaluate strength of an event like this, but it's like, I would say it's not, it's definitely going to be, weaker of an effect than something like Star Chart, but of course you can do it multiple times. So like there are going to be scenarios where it's like that ability to just sort of stack your deck is actually like crazy strong. If you have like extra money and you want to just make sure like every turn I'm like, this is exactly what my hand is going to look like you can do that. And that'll be really cool. Because if you're drawing deck and you buy some stuff and then you just bury it, like that essentially is top decking. So that's one thing to note, is that like, you need extra buys because of the ordering, but you, like if you're drawing deck, you're buying components, you can just like use it as like a cheap like equivalent of tracker or whatever other top decking stuff, tiara. So that's cool. So I think this is good. I think it's cool, and I think it's good. Maelstrom up next. 4-cost event, trash 3 cards from your hand. Each other player with 5 or more cards in hand trashes 1 of them. Whoa. So Donald X says Maelstrom is a trasher and maybe helps the other players, maybe attacks them. Yeah, that's nuts. So this is like the governor of thinning, right? Not because like obviously governor has like a trash mode, but it's a remodel. But this is like the governor of thinning. It's like, okay, I want to thin, and maybe you guys get to thin. Except that unlike governor, it's not optional. That's so bonkers. Wow. Like there's gonna be, so you have to have cards to trash, but my mind is immediately jumping to the extreme case of like it's the end of the game and you're jockeying for position and you're like, okay, I'm gonna trash some cards, like I have some extra stuff that I can afford to trash, and then so I'm gonna buy Maelstrom to like try to attack my opponent and like ruin their turn. That's gonna be, I don't know, I can imagine that being very frustrating. This is like a it's definitely like a a Hail Mary sort of play, but it could work out. Mostly obviously it's going to be thinning, it's going to be friendly thinning. You can compare this in that respect to Banish. So Banish costs 4, but only, and can get rid of any number of cards, but they all have to be the same type. This doesn't have that limitation. But like similarly to Banish, you either need like a decent concentration of econ, or like a good number of cards in your hand, like, because Maelstrom to trash one estate is like, well, sometimes that's worth it with Banish. It's not going to be what you want to do with Maelstrom, like, clearly. Maybe if you have Curse Gold, like a game with Curse Gold, Copper, and then you see all 3 of your shelters, you're like, okay, bang, Maelstrom, like, get rid of them all. That would be okay, although you still have to gain the curse. Baker token could potentially make that, but you're still going to have at least 3 coppers in hand. So like, trashing 2 cards when your opponent gets to trash 1 for free, probably still not worth it. So like, opening this is going to be really rare, I think. But like, so it's more comparable to like banishing later, where you're just trying to like get like a semi-big early turn where you're like, okay, I've got actually 3 junks to get rid of. And I guess that sort of makes it also comparable to like trade, just in terms of like what you're trying to do, or like cemetery even, right? Cemetery, you still need to, like, cemetery without a workshop. So you still need to hit 4 and then have cards to trash. So those are some, like, the value of those comparisons is mostly just in terms of thinking about, like, what do I need to do to take advantage of this? The opponent trashing part obviously is completely different and is like that's nutty. I think, I don't know. I think it's going to be, I think the actual rate of, like, it looks scary, right? Like, your opponent can force you to trash. Oh my gosh. But I think the frequency with which that is going to be relevant is going to be really very low. Because most of the time when somebody wants to trash 3 cards, because it's not optional, you have to trash 3 cards. I mean, you could have fewer cards in your hand. In fact, in that in-game scenario I was talking about, if you don't have any green, in your hand, you can buy this and trash nothing. But if you have the cards, you do have to trash them. So, like, you're not going to be buying this very much in situations where, like, your opponent is, like, totally thin and you're not, unless there's, like, a big asymmetry in cursing or something like that. So that's, I think the number of times that it's going to, like, attack is going to be pretty low. Something else to note, I guess, about this, it isn't true of Banish. It is true of Cemetery, I suppose, is that this is the kind of thing that you can use in a game where there's, like, Coven or something where, like, you're going to get curses later in the game. You can kind of just, like, if you can get enough money, right, to hit Maelstrom, you can kind of just, like, move through them pretty quickly with this effect, like, compared to, if you're like, oh, I have, like, a junk dealer, but it's going to take ages for my junk dealer to get through all the curses or something like that. Or if you didn't invest in a trasher, or there isn't another trasher, like, it'll be pretty good at, like, late game thinning in that respect. And in that situation, I could see it feeling like an attack depending on what your opponent's deck looks like. All right, finally we have Prepare. 3-cost event. Set aside your hand face up. At the start of your next turn, play those actions and treasures in any order, then discard the rest. Oh, it's like Tactician the event. Let's see what Dalavex says about that. Prepare is an exciting one. All your unusable cards and any others you feel like saving leap into play for you on your next turn. Yeah, so it's a good point that, like, you can use this to, like, this is like a way to counter Haunted Woods, for example, like, as an extreme example, but, like, in terms of all your usable cards, as he said. So like you could buy this and set aside like 70 million green cards, and then you don't play anything, but you get to chuck them all into your discard, and they're not on top of your deck, and you didn't draw them into your opening hand, so that's all very nice. The other part of this, well, I mean, there's a bunch of things you could do with it. So like, for example, you could, if you have a 3/4 and you want to open with a 5, you can just like open, prepare, set aside a copper, and then the copper goes into play. And then you've got your 4 coppers from your 4-cost hand. You get to open with a 5, so that's cool. It's on sad days if you have a 4/3, but sorry, a 3/4. But like you can somewhat close to half the time do that. And similarly, you can, I mean, there's going to be other, times where you want to like spike stuff that you can use this for. Like if you want to buy Inheritance or Citadel or a province with Tournament or whatever, set some stuff aside and then use that to spike something. Obviously, there's also like, you can use this to like set up, like you can use it as a village, so you can like you have like I don't know, a bunch of like market squares or something, some like relatively innocuous cantrip, and there's no village on the board, so you use prepare as your village. Market square is good because you get the plus buy too to make this actually work. So yeah, that's cool, and like, and the effects that combines with the junk stuff, so like you can do that and set aside the garbage cards and not have them in your next hand. So this seems quite good to me. There are definitely going to be boards where it's going to be hard to use because it doesn't refund your buy, and it is kind of expensive. I mean, it's less expensive than Summon, and granted, you don't get a card with it, but you can set aside like kind of any number of things, although you might have wanted to play those things during your turn rather than waiting for the next turn. And you do have to, like, it does have a kind of like duration-esque aspect where if you are relying on it as like your village or something, then you need to have stuff that you can play every other turn, so that you can get the effect every turn. So that, is something to keep in mind. It isn't true in the same way of something like Summon, but like it's overall more flexible than Summon, I would say. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's better, but it does more different things, at least. That seems really cool. All right, so final note is that tomorrow we will get durations and traits. Well, we did already get a duration today, but I guess we're going to get a bunch more tomorrow, and we're going to get to learn what traits are, and that'll be exciting. Perhaps, like, I'm somewhat expecting the traits to be our first foray into things that are just adjectives. So it's like everything in Dominion pretty much is like nouns or verbs, but like, or maybe adjectives or like gerunds or something, right? Like maybe not, I don't know, we'll see. But if it's like a modifier, right, it would kind of make sense. Not that this is important, but anyway. So yeah, that's the end of today's previews. Go check them out on Dominion.games, and I will see you tomorrow for day 2. Thanks for watching, and until then.